Hello, good morning, and good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us from. My name is Stuart. I am the client engagement lead for the US here at Remobi, and it's my pleasure to be hosting the second in a series of webinars Remobi are hosting for CTOs and VPs of engineering. Today's topic is one that is quite exciting for me. So today we're going to be talking about making nearshoring your secret weapon for engineering success. And it's my pleasure to have a very special guest on today, someone who I've been following for a very long time, Dave Mangot, CEO and founder of Mango Tech. It's a pleasure to have you on, Dave. How are you this morning?
Good. How are you? Welcome from the West Coast, I guess.
Cool. So the running order today will be a brief introduction, so an opportunity for Dave to tell you about his work working with engineering teams globally. Then we're going to look at some slides with a specific focus on how nearshoring can add value to your engineering team setup. And then Dave has kindly agreed to host an open Q&A. So if you look to the right-hand side of your dashboard, you'll notice there's an opportunity to post either publicly or privately. Now, we'd love you to post as many questions as possible. We have Dave for a short period of time, but this is a great opportunity to get some feedback from someone who's been in the trenches and an opportunity for you to learn directly from Dave. So without further ado, Dave, please tell us about your background.
Thanks. It's good to be here. My name is Dave Mangot. Like Stuart said, I am the author of the book, DevOps Patterns for Private Equity. I've been in Silicon Valley for decades at this point. Sort of followed a pretty traditional career path, I'd say, starting as an engineer and working over time up into different leadership positions. I was an architect in infrastructure engineering for Salesforce. I ran a global SRE organization for SolarWinds. So that's companies like Pingdom and Loggly. And in the past 6 years or so, I've been working with private equity portfolio companies on their technology organizations. So how do we get the most value creation, the best margins, all kinds of fun things like that out of our technology companies. So and as part of that, I've been working with a lot of companies that do offshoring or nearshoring. Certainly have worked with people all over the world throughout my career, had people either as peers or people reporting to me. So I have pretty strong feelings about working with distributed teams.
Excellent. So what we will do is we will post a poll shortly. You'll see that. Please interact with that poll. Give us your feedback. Like I said, the aim of this is an opportunity for you all to have a chance to speak to Dave directly and share some of the challenges that you face. So definitely post your questions throughout. But yeah, Dave, over to you. I understand you have some slides that will give us an introduction to Nearshore.
Sure. So hopefully you should be able to see this pretty easily.
Perfect.
All good? Great. All right, so today we're talking about making nearshoring your secret weapon for engineering success. And really, we're talking first about why would we bother to do anything like this at all? So this is obviously a fictitious job description, but it should kind of give you sort of a frame of reference here. So certainly there's nobody that has 12 or more years of generative AI experience, but the important part here is that the reason that we're going to do things like nearshoring or offshoring is we want very quick access to talent that has the necessary skills that we need. So a lot of people here, nearshoring, offshoring. Okay, well, the only reason we're going to do anything like that is we're trying to save money. And saving money can be a part of the equation, but for me, I work with private equity portfolio companies, private equity firms. If they really wanted to do this in terms of the only thing that matters is saving money, they have ways of doing this, like to just like drive all the costs down as much as possible. And that's not really what they're going for. A private equity firm would rather pay $60,000 for an engineer that they can get in a matter of weeks. And if that engineer doesn't work out, they can get another one like very quickly, then spend, let's say, $40,000 and have to do all the work themselves. And it's kind of a SaaS idea, right? And SaaS, we don't want to run, our monitoring system when we can pay someone else to do that, because, as Jeff Bezos used to say at Amazon, that's undifferentiated heavy lifting. And the ability to hire engineers is important, but what people really want is access to talent and access to the people who can get the job done. And it's not about driving everything down to the absolute last penny that they can. That's not what's important. And so a lot of times there's a need to bring in people from an offshoring company or a nearshoring company, and we can talk about the differences between those for a project. And so in the old days, in the early days of the DevOps movement, people used to talk about the wall of confusion. So the developers wanted change, operations wanted stability, development would create some software. They would say it runs on my laptop, and they would throw it over the wall to operations. And then operations would say, this is garbage, this doesn't run, this crashes. And, there would be an argument back and forth about whose fault it is and all kinds of other fun things like that. And if you're doing offshoring or nearshoring incorrectly, it can look a lot like the wall of confusion. So I've worked with portfolio companies that said, okay, we've got this antiquated platform. It actually is the platform that makes all the money for the organization. So it's not like it's, well, we should just shut this thing down and be done, because if you shut it down, you have no more business. But, it's very hard to sometimes maintain a software platform that's been around for an awful long time. And what I've seen people do is they say, well, we're going to take the engineers that we already have, we're going to leave them focused on the revenue generation and keep the old system running. And we're going to, offshore or nearshore. I guess I should clear that up. Nearshoring meaning people who are close to your time zone, versus offshoring can be sort of in any time zone. We'll talk later about why that's important. But, they farm out this work. The offshoring team, let's say, will write, hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of lines of code, and then they will wrap up their project, hand what they've written off to the team that's there, and say bye. And this never works, ever. And there's a thing that we talk about in incident response or incident management, the learning from incidents community, if you want to go look things like that up. The idea is the difference between work as imagined and work as done. And that's what this is suffering from, really, is there's this idea that we're going to create this brand new platform. Then the people who wrote the new platform will sit down with our existing staff and they will train them on what they wrote. They will write documentation. They'll show them how everything works, and then they'll leave. And that training will be the thing that allows us to be successful. And I see this over and over again. This isn't a unique concept. But what winds up happening is that work is imagined and work is done are not the same. And the 100,000, 10,000, whatever decisions that were made in the course of developing this new platform, also without any input from the people who actually understand how the old platform works, all those things are actually significant. They really matter. And so when the first big outage comes, nobody knows how to fix anything because they were trained on what happens when everything works well. Because nobody sits down and thinks of all the different possible ways that anything could break, because that's impossible. there's no way for us to know all the possible ways that things could break. And so what we've sort of recreated is that wall of confusion, right? Where development throws the stuff over the wall to people who don't understand how it works, don't understand the decisions, don't understand all those things. So it actually works out really poorly. Another reason why people say that they're going to do offshoring is we want to be like Google and follow the sun. Follow the sun, meaning there's always somebody awake at a time where something can happen with your platform, when something can break. And the short answer to that generally is you're not Google. But the reason that we say things like snappy answers like you're not Google is Google has done all the work to make sure that they have instrumentation. They have all the different testing that would need to be done. They do failure testing, just like Netflix. Everybody's heard of the Chaos Monkey at this point, probably. They do all that stuff. Netflix has a system for deployment that is based on machine learning. So if they're doing a blue-green deployment and they start getting signal from their telemetry that says that this might not be a good deployment, they have machine learning that will automatically roll everything back and put things back to the previous state. If you don't have all of those things, then the idea that we're just going to do whatever Google does is silly. It's absurd. And so what I kind of tell people is stop worrying about following the sun. Like, you can definitely use your other, these offshore teams or nearshore teams. But instead of spending the effort on how to hand off problems overnight, let's work on either preventing problems or being able to recover from problems and things like that. And I think this is where nearshoring really starts to shine over offshoring, because offshoring really is encouraging us to throw things over the wall in a follow the sun pattern to people on the other side of the world. And it's their problem at that point. Where with nearshoring, these people are much closer to us in time zone. So we're actually overlapping a lot. And there's a lot more opportunity for collaboration there. And we can spend our time on instrumentation and unit tests and failure testing and all these other kinds of things that we would want to do. So the right way, at least in my opinion, is to have a partnership with your nearshoring teams. And yes, you can have a partnership with your offshoring teams, but that is a lot harder to do when they are 12 and a half hours off of your time zone. So if it's 8 o'clock at night for me, it's 8:30 in the morning for them, which is great, where I can be happily working with that team that it's 8:30 in the morning, but that means I have to work at 8 o'clock at night. I don't want to work at 8 o'clock at night. I want to spend time with my friends. I want to spend time with my family. I want to do all those kinds of things. And it doesn't work to flip it over, because those people have those same things that they want to do. They're humans as well. And so if we're going to do the big rewrite, we should take some of these, additional capacity that we have and partner them up with our team. Say, this is what we're doing in this existing platform. This is what we're running. And these are ways that this thing can break. What are we going to do in this new platform to make sure that those same things don't happen? And when we're developing the new platform, we can do like really fun things like dark launching, where we can take some of the traffic that's coming into the old platform and tee it off and send it to the new platform. Ultimately, that traffic we're going to drop on the floor. We're not going to run transactions against someone's bank or whatever, all kinds of things like that, which would really mess things up. But we can actually have a lot more confidence that when we actually launch this new platform that our nearshoring team has helped us develop, that thing's actually going to work correctly. Because the scariest thing, as someone who ran multiple SRE teams, is this idea that we don't know if it's going to work until we finally flip the switch on the last day. But what is the % chance that thing's actually going to work correctly? Almost nothing, almost zero. It's just a very bad way of going about these kinds of things. And so what we really want to do is, in the process of developing the new platform, we want to validate the new platform so that turning on at the end this new platform that is going to be super amazing is basically a formality. Like, we already know that this thing is going to be working well. And that's a great way of taking advantage of the power of having that talent and availability of engineers who really know what they're doing by partnering with a nearshoring company like Remobi and things. And that's how I feel like you get success. And so ultimately, I said in the beginning, we would talk about the difference between nearshoring and offshoring. It's really about communication, and which is hilarious because early in the DevOps movement, that's what we said the DevOps movement was about, was communication and having developers communicate with operators. And in this case, it's just a lot easier to communicate with a nearshoring team than it is to communicate with an offshoring team. Yeah, that's kind of it.
Okay, that's super interesting. Now, one of the exciting things about having you as a guest speaker today is just the wealth of experience that you have over the many years that you've consulted, but also been an operator in some large technology brands, Salesforce, SolarWinds, etc. What would be really interesting to understand is kind of what you saw in those organizations that worked well, that didn't work well, but also one thing that I'm really intrigued by is, let's say, for example, I already have like an existing offshore team, right? It's underperforming. I know it's underperforming, and I need to do something to fix this. What are kind of like the things that you've seen work when it comes to making sure that an offshore team is aligned so that, I can get the most out of an existing investment that I've already made?
Yeah, I think I'm going to take this slide down in a second, but the answer is on the slide. So that's why it's appropriate to have it there. But really, it's about communication and, the hack, let's call it, for, when a team is underperforming is to increase communication. And this is such a core concept in the DevOps movement. A book that I recommend to people all the time is Dominica DeGrandis's Making Work Visible. And like, making work visible is great in that, like, we can say, oh, well, this team has, 50 tasks they're trying to do in 2 weeks, and they really should only have 20, and all those Kanban, Agile, Scrum kind of discussions, which is definitely a huge part of the book. But really, if you think just about the title, Making Work Visible is about communication. It's being able to understand, what a team is working on. It's being able to have other people understand what a team is working on. And that communication is tremendous. So, the hack always, and most senior engineering leaders will tell you this: if I have an offshore team that isn't performing well, somebody needs to get on an airplane. Like, that's the biggest hack. Like, call your, like, do we have travel agents anymore? It's not the 70s, but like, get on your favorite travel website and book a flight, because that's the best way to get a team to perform, is to really build that understanding. And so even when I've worked at, these big companies, and we've had teams, distributed teams, so people all over the world, one of the most important things is to get people on airplanes a few times a year and have them spend time together in person. And that doesn't mean, this isn't like some kind of silly RTO. Everybody needs to sit in the same office and cubicles next to each other all the time. That these are engineers. Like, a lot of the work they do, it doesn't require like that amount of thing. Like, we can work asynchronously. But if you've sat down and you've had a meal with somebody and you understand them, then if somebody writes something on Slack or Teams and you're like, how did they mean that? Did they mean that I'm a big idiot? Or did they mean that this is something that we should probably pay attention to? If you've never spent time with that person and you don't know who they are, and they're just kind of somebody who exists like out there in the ether, you might interpret that as they think I'm a big idiot. But if you spent time with them, if you know that their kid's name is this and this is what they like to do, and that, then you're probably going to be like, oh, yeah, they meant this is something we need to pay attention to. And that really helps. That's part of team dynamics. Like, how do I feel safe to talk to other people about my crazy idea? You have to have built those kind of relationships.
Breaking bread together. I think Joel Spolsky, the ex-CEO of Stack Overflow, was a big proponent of breaking bread together. So I have some interesting questions already coming in. I'm just gonna read the questions out in no particular order. The first question I have for you, Dave: what strategies do you recommend for securing IP, so preventing IP theft, with offshore employees or contractors?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, certainly at some level, there's nothing you can do, right? That's the first thing to understand. But the other things I think that are really important there is one of the things we haven't made a big distinction on, though I talk about it in the ebook that we'll mention later, I guess, is the difference between right shoring, near shoring, and offshoring. And there are going to be situations where right shoring sort of means we're very cognizant of rules, laws, intellectual property, regulations around who has access to what environments. All that kind of stuff is involved in right shoring. And I think we could take this question about intellectual property and expand that. And really, it's a balance, right? We want to give people enough information to be able to do their jobs. But also there's no reason that, we just throw the doors wide open and just say like, hey, everybody do whatever you want. Just don't do anything bad or don't do anything wrong, because that's not, that doesn't make any sense either. If you really get into the security literature and you spend a lot of time with security engineers and those kinds of people, you understand that the job of a security engineer is to balance risk, right? And so we used to joke at Salesforce that the security people were so aggressive about locking everything down that they wouldn't care if Salesforce went out of business as long as we were secure doing it. And that's obviously not the job of a security engineer, is to drive the company out of business. And also that was, our perspective as engineers who were subject to this. But I think the important things there are to balance risk. And like, if you have intellectual property concerns, like what are the things that we can do that allow people to get their job done, but also not just saying, hey, let's say Git is wide open, every single repo, it doesn't matter, just go in, do whatever you have to do. Like, that's probably not going to work either. And so we have to come up with sensible policies that sort of protect their IP and protect, obviously lots of other things, protect customer data, all kinds of things like that, so that we're balancing risk and still able to run the company.
Okay. What's interesting about that point is I often think about working with a partner. I mean, essentially, this is not outsourcing, right? So you're not giving someone a piece of work and saying, hey, go build this and bring it back to me. You're essentially employing a team of people who become part of your team, part of your culture. And I think maybe that's where people get this wrong, right? They see the offshore team as a separate entity that isn't part of their core engineering team, when in reality it should be. Therefore, everybody in that offshore or nearshore team should be treated the same way, should be evaluated the same way, and should probably be hired in the same way that you would hire someone locally or within your core engineering team. Would you say that would be a fair way to see things?
Well, I think it's a good point. Obviously, the hiring, obviously, you're not hiring them in the same way because the offshore or the nearshoring partner is bringing you those people. But I think it's important, the word that I've been using is partnering with your nearshoring company, like partnering with Remobi, like, because they're your partners. They're on your team. That's what I was saying earlier about the way to do this correctly is to bring your nearshoring partner teams, people and your existing teams together. It's if you are going to keep them at arm's length and not bring them in and make them part of your team because you have concerns about, intellectual property, whatever, going to have a bad time. Like, they have to be able to do their work, and like being able to do their work doesn't mean every time I need access to this secret, I have to ask, Bill to give me access. That's not going to work. That's, in lean, we talk about waiting as waste. Like, there's a lot of waste there. And I think this is why I was going back to this idea of risk, is like, what's your goal? Like, if your goal is to have people do garbage work that, nobody else wants to do and whatever, then that could be your goal. I don't think you're going to get a very good experience out of partnering with people. But if your goal is to increase revenue or increase margins or, drive up customer, use of our platform, like that's going to probably be worth a lot more than like really locking everything down and making it so that nobody can get their job done. And that's why I said you have to balance risk. There's no, it's fun to throw technical solutions at everything. And as an engineer, I love to throw technical solutions at things, but like what turns out to be the hard part of engineering, and especially engineering leadership, is how do we balance these things in a way that we actually get the results that the business wants? Because that's why we come to work every day, is to get the results that the business wants. Like, being able to play with technology is a nice side effect of that, but nobody's paying you to come and play. Like, you can play at home in your home lab or whatever, but we want to get, what's best for the business accomplished. And so, yeah, I think it's really important to integrate those engineers together to make it one team that's marching towards business goals.
Cool. So Isaac has asked two questions. The first question I think I can answer from a Remobi perspective. Second question, I think we've kind of answered it, but I'm gonna bring it up anyway, just in case. So Isaac would like to know strategies to fully augment nearshore engineers into the core engineering team. So working with product and stakeholders, etc., versus just handing a spec and waiting for a deliverable. So this is kind of like, an outsourcer versus, a company that is a partner, right?
I mean, I don't know if you want to tackle the Remobi thing. I would say that like something I wrote in the ebook is the closer that your implementation looks to outsourcing, the worse your results are going to be. And it's kind of what we talked about from that wall of confusion. If I throw specs over the wall to somebody and then I wait to get back whatever they happen to interpret those specs to mean, then I don't think that's going to work out very well. I mean, it's not even whether I think that. Like, I've never seen that work out well. I've seen that lots of times. It just doesn't work. Like, it's a expression I use with my clients a lot. That's a great idea. It just doesn't work. And like throwing something over the wall there is not good, because it's not about writing better specs. I know a lot of people think the answer to a lot of problems is just have them write better specs. Just have them write better user stories is usually the way you hear a lot of that. And like, there's no substitute for communication. Like, we are still humans. If Stuart's using an LLM and I'm using an LLM, we're probably going to ask the same thing in slightly different ways. And the LLM's going to give slightly different answers, because Stuart's way of speaking and my way of speaking are not the same. We're not the same person. And so there's going to be ambiguity, and those things need to be cleared up. So you don't want to throw specs over the wall to somebody and hope it works out for the best. You want to integrate them with their team. So when somebody comes on in the morning and is like, I read this thing, they said they want this. Does that mean this, or does that mean this other thing? Oh, great question. Let's find out. Because I'd much rather find out right then than find out, let's say 6 weeks down the road. And then like you come to me and say, hey, look at this great thing we built. And I say, oh, no. When I said, X there, I meant this, and you thought it meant this other thing, and now you built the wrong thing, and I just spent 6 weeks paying you to build the wrong thing. And this all goes back into Agile, but like, we want fast feedback. And the way to get fast feedback is to communicate, not to throw things over the wall.
Cool. So the other part of the question, which I'm happy to field, is how do you find engineers with verifiable, relevant industry experience? So, for example, lending in the US, PCI, DSS, etc. Or is that even possible? It's definitely possible. I think if you look at the engineering community in South America, if you look at the engineering community in Eastern Europe, depending on where you're based, a large proportion of those engineers will come from product engineering backgrounds where they would have been exposed to either working within a US startup, US scale up, or a US enterprise, or they've been building these tools or solutions locally for a local startup that is looking to go global. So in this example, if it was with Remobi, we would be specifically looking for pockets or communities where we can find people that we know have that relevant experience. So for example, with PCI, we might be looking at engineers that are coming from Banco Mexico or Santander, for example. And that would be where we would find the relevant talent that would help you achieve your goals and obviously build what you need to build locally. Next question for you, Dave. Which metrics, SLAs, if any, should I be tracking with my nearshore teams that differ to my internal engineering teams? I feel like there's a theme here.
Yeah, I mean, your nearshore teams are your internal teams and vice versa, right? They're the same. So if you treat them as a separate team, then those are the results that you're going to get, and you're not going to get that communication back and forth. If the expectation, like we want to talk about SLAs, like if the expectation is any pull request should be reviewed within, 12 hours for your internal team, then that's the SLA for your nearshoring team. Have it reviewed within 12 hours. But your nearshore partners or your nearshore engineers and your internal engineers are going to be reviewing each other's pull requests, like because they're working on the same projects and they're trying to achieve the same goals. And if they have different goals, that's where we get into a lot of problems. I can often look at an org chart and say, oh yeah, this is going to be a problem, because you can see on the org chart that people have different goals. And when you draw your nearshoring teams on the same org chart as your internal teams, it better not look like they have totally different goals, because then they're going to be each trying to achieve their own goals, which may not work out very well.
Okay, so I have more of a business related question. So this is a great value creation type question for you. So great for the PE audience. Could you share any experience where nearshoring has been pivotal in navigating tight growth margins successfully?
So I can't think of any, and the reason is because, like we said, kind of on one of the very first slides, is yes, it can be cheaper to do a nearshoring team, but typically the reason that I'm seeing private equity backed companies bringing in nearshoring teams is I have a giant project I'm trying to get done, and in that case, like, I want access to talent. That being said, I've also seen people who want to have a larger team, not just for a project, but to run the company, to, like, for, what do we call it? KTLO, like keep the lights on, like, running the business, like all the things that it takes to run the business, which isn't some big project. It's hey, we've got this, requirement from the product organization that wants this feature and whatever. And that is all done by, let's say, offshoring teams. And yes, those offshoring teams are more inexpensive than doing everything, let's say, domestically. And so that keeps margins up or keeps margins in where you want them to be, however you want to describe that. But I haven't seen it as we need to very quickly, rapidly create like big margins. Like, yes, like I've seen definitely, we're going to do this, we're going to get better margins, but it's not a short-term project at that point. It's this is how we're going to run the business. And it's going to be a mix of, domestic engineers and offshore engineers or nearshore engineers, wherever they happen to be. And the proportions of our engineers are going to be different than it was when we purchased the company. So let's say it was 100% domestic engineers when we bought the company, and now it's going to be 70%, nearshore engineers and 30% domestic engineers. Like, I've seen that certainly in terms of increasing margins. But I don't remember the original question exactly, but I haven't seen it as any kind of rapid strategy. Like, yes, as it certainly that those things are, when you have a good nearshore partner that you're working with that has a lot of talent, you can make those kinds of changes happen quickly. But but the idea behind it is a long-term play. It's not, or at least as long as the investment is not like a, very short-term kind of idea. I don't know if do you think that captures the question?
No, I definitely do. And I think it becomes more interesting because you also want a partner who is stable and is able to go on that journey with you, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because you're looking at like a time horizon of maybe 3 to 4 years, particularly if you're key.
Now it's even longer because hold times have increased, but yeah.
Right. And then you have you have issues around retention. You want to keep your best talent. So you kind of want to have a partner that's in it for the long run with you, as opposed to, someone who's just there to fill a couple of roles and then disappears.
I get emails every morning from 50 different companies that are going to give me a bunch of PHP engineers for the next 2 weeks. A, I don't have a need for that. And B, even if I did, I wouldn't have a need for that. Like, that's absurd.
Okay, so I have an interesting question for you. Let's say that we're sold on the idea of going nearshore. So, we understand that South America is a hub for great talent.
For the U.S., it's a great,
or Eastern Europe for, UK or Western European companies.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
How would I go about identifying the right place to source that talent? How would I identify locations, places that would probably present the best opportunity for me to get the best possible talent based on my budget?
I mean, that's almost a question for you, right? I mean, for me, like the way that I approach part of that is, I'm looking for communities that are strong. So you mentioned a little bit about 5 minutes ago about they have experience with like this bank, or they have done this startup or whatever. That kind of, I don't know what you call it, like, there's a whole community around that you don't see, right? If you're going to have talented engineers who are working on great projects, like there's local meetup groups, there's, a university that has a really good computer science program. There's all kinds of things around those things that you might only see the fact that, hey, this person worked at this bank or whatever, but like, what you're missing is the community that's around that. And so I know, at companies I've worked with, they've gotten a lot of talent in Poland around a great university that has a great, computer science program, or like places like Colombia have really amazing DevOps communities. So like DevOps Days, is a local conference. Like, they get great speakers, they get great sponsors, they get all kinds of sort of support from a community of people that are supporting that. And I think that it's not about the engineers being better in terms of like they're smarter or anything like that, because there's smart people all over the world. But like engineers are going to perform better if they have an entire support structure around them of like, you know, I used to do this all the time when I was a junior engineer. The people I hung out with a lot of times were the people that I worked with. And then like, you know, my girlfriend would be like, how you guys just keep talking about tech? Like you don't stop. Like you're having a beer and you're talking about tech. It's like, this is what I love. And these are my friends and this is what they love. And that's what we talk. And that's a community. And that doesn't mean we didn't go snowboarding or whatever. Certainly we did all those other things, but like, the strong engineers are going to have like a big support network around them. And so when I'm looking around for like, where can I find really good talent? And again, like, you know, if I'm partnering with a nearshoring partner, this is sort of their job. I'm going to look for places that have a really good community around the engineers to make sure that they're always pushing themselves and developing and exchanging ideas and growing as an engineer.
Okay, cool. I feel like I could keep you on this call for forever and just keep asking questions, but I appreciate, you know, we spent a lot of time together today. So I'd like to thank you, Dave, for obviously taking this opportunity and giving us your time. I hope this has been helpful for our audience. I'd like to let everybody know that as part of the follow-up to this webinar, obviously we'll have a recording, which will be available to you. But Dave has also produced a comprehensive ebook, as he mentioned earlier. The focus is on nearshoring, offshoring, and right-shoring. So we'll provide you with a link so that you can obviously contact Dave and have access to that ebook if it's interesting for you. And you may have noticed on the last slide, there was a link at the bottom, communication. Dave has produced a short course that, if I'm correct, it's kind of like the fundamentals to DevOps.
It's about the fundamentals of how DevOps interacts with private equity-backed companies.
Okay, cool. So you'll also have access to that short course if that's also something that interests you. But yeah, Dave, again, I mean, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. That was fun. Those are some really good questions.
Cool. Well, hopefully we get to speak again soon.
All right. Cheers.